it was a hot, rainy day like today,
Hmm.
and for some reason my car wasn't working, so I was taking the number 8 bus home from downtown, and it's a big windy bus, and it was packed. And there's all these arms, and people are in their armpits and hanging
Yeah.
on, and you can't. So I'm sitting down, and all these people are going, and through all these arms and legs and bodies, I'll call this girl Nicole. I see her. I see Nicole.
Okay.
I see this girl that that
Yeah.
I used to help.
Hmm.
And but what I saw really surprised me. I didn't see somebody disheveled and uh, needing any sort of help or supports. What I saw was a lady in a blue trench coat with a bag, with a leather suitcase that had an emblem of a bank on it, and she was on her phone talking to her husband, and she was talking about how getting the kids to soccer, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
everything that
A
was about
normal
normal.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was standing up, and I wanted to go say, "Hey, Nicole, it's me." I stopped myself, and I realized that at the time that I was working with her and seeing her and trying to help her, she was a mess. And I was part of that life. I was part of everything that was wrong with that life. And I knew that if she wanted to ever get a hold of me, she could. So I
Hmm.
realized that I had done what I had done. I
Huh.
stopped myself from reaching out to her and saying hi. And I just sat on the bus and I watched her for a while, you know, and just amazed. As I'm looking through her and we stop, the bus stops, and I lose sight of her, and
Yeah.
that's it for again. I've stopped,
Yeah.
but just about as the bus is about to turn off, I get this knock on the window, and I look out the bus window, and there's Nicole, and she's got a big smile on her face, and she goes like this to me,
Oh, really?
and off she walks.
Hello. Welcome. My name is Kevin. This is part 2 of my conversation with Mark Cherrington from the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights in Edmonton. He and his team do their very best to help the most vulnerable in society get their basic needs met, and they advocate for them as well. Before we get to that conversation, I'll cover some recent tech news I think you should know about and give my take on each story. After that, I'll preview some of what's new on my website, kevincanfixit.ca, and then we'll get to the interview portion. This podcast complements my website, kevincanfixit.ca, which launched in June of this year. There, you can find my free and paid videos and blog posts that will help you better understand and use your technology. This will help you avoid paying high hourly rates or waiting for your computer to be fixed somewhere else. You can take a look at the free blog posts and videos and sign up for my free 2-week trial, no credit card required, which will give you access to posts like how to download, install, and use super anti-spyware, how to download, install, and use IOBIT's Advanced System Care as part of a system cleanup, how to disable startup items in Windows 10, and more. Kevin Talks Tech consists of 3 parts. First, we'll take a look at the latest tech news and I'll provide my thoughts on why I think you should care. Secondly, I'll have a conversation with a guest. In this episode, I'll talk to Mark Cherrington a little bit later. Don't worry about scrambling to write everything down. You'll find show notes, links, and even a transcript over at kevintalkstech.ca. I want to quickly mention that I was a guest on the Business on Point podcast with Danielle Klooster. She happens to be my business coach, but she helps many others as well. We talked for about 20 minutes about my core business. Once again, Kevin Can Fix It. Please check it out. You can find the link in the show notes of this episode. I'd also like to remind you that I was a guest on Mark Poppins' Business Banter podcast a few weeks ago, and that's really worth listening to. We had a lot of fun. You can find that at businessbanter.ca. I'll include that in the show notes as well. Alright, let's get started. Here's the latest tech news. Amazon, or specifically its smart home devices company, Ring, is in the news again, and they're still sharing data from their cameras without your consent, with law enforcement upon request. No warrant is needed either, per Amazon's own policies, which you inherently agree to when you use a Ring device or Ring camera. They got major backlash for this in the past, and they're apparently still doing it. It's worth mentioning here that Google does this as well. So Amazon, really, isn't the only company doing it, but it's still important to be aware of. Presumably, they just don't want to contact individual customers, as they have a lot of them, so by building it into their terms, they can avoid that. Clearly, this is a controversial policy at these companies, but I kind of understand where they're coming from. That said, it's important to understand that when you connect any device to the internet, particularly cameras, there's the possibility of stuff like this happening. I stopped using Ring devices 2 years ago when this was first revealed, and switched to Google's Nest products, but I later discovered that Google's doing the exact same thing. That said, I still prefer the Nest products. You can find the links to this story from Android Central and The Verge in the show notes. After their days-long nationwide outage that affected all Rogers services, the company is only offering 5 days of service, 5 days of credit toward their services for those affected. They're also implementing a change to how 911 calls will be handled when the Rogers network goes down. They'll be automatically rerouted through another currently unnamed cellular carrier. They have also suggested other new protocols and investment to prevent future major network outages, but they aren't providing many details regarding how that's going to work yet. You can find the link to the CBC article on this topic in the show notes. Is there a tech news story you think I should cover? Please email me at news@kevintalkstech.ca. Please consider this a disclaimer and a trigger warning for the nature of this conversation with Mark Cherrington, specifically in regards to a suicidal minor and a sexually exploited minor, in regards to the work Mark and his team does, though the latter is only alluded to in a still very powerful story. In part 1 of this conversation, we mostly focused on his organization, the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights, and how technology plays a part in the important work they do and the challenges they face. We also touched on some uncomfortable, shocking, and even dangerous situations he's encountered and his team have encountered over his decades of experience that have had both negative and positive outcomes, all things considered. In part 2, he talks about a suicidal Indigenous minor and how he prevented at least one opportunity for her to kill herself, though those in charge didn't seem to care. He also tells the story, again from his perspective, the story of a sexually exploited minor, though she grew up to have a seemingly much better life. I implore you, please don't let this deter you from watching or listening. These stories are not easy to hear, but they're necessary to hear, and may be triggering for some people. Please be aware that at no point do we divulge personal details or identifiable information of any of the people Mark and his team have helped, similar to what he shares on social media. Mark also makes a point to use fake names. I am deeply proud and honored to feature Mark and his stories in this podcast, and I hope you will appreciate them as well. Without further ado, let's go to that conversation. I seem to have skipped a question here, so I'm going to get to it.
Sure.
And the question's actually, well, it's supposed to be for you, but you turned the tables on me, I think. Do you have a relatively simple tech question I can answer? And your response was, how do you, Kevin, see technology being an advocate for our most vulnerable? So I'm not really sure how to answer that beyond what I just know that people can use, how people can use technology to do the things like you talked about. But of course, there's difficulty in that too, as you described in detail. As accessible as it is or not, the fact that it exists, compared to I'm not sure if it's made it harder or easier. I presume easier for documentation purposes, taking photos, what have you. And the ability for that to, in theory at least, if it's turned on, to be uploaded to the cloud automatically or to be shared by email, or that's powerful. So not everybody has the means to do that, but for those that do, or at least access them when they need to, have a tablet, to have a Chromebook even, or whatever kind of phone they can get their hands on. It makes me cringe when you mention the library example for how insecure those computers can be, and the fact that many people use them. the access to information and to send and receive information, as far as accessing that technology or affording that technology. Of course, the issues involved with opening PDFs, and the list goes on for the different tech issues that many of us face regardless. These are challenges that we have to deal with. So I don't know if it was a better system before. I mean, you've been doing this for decades now, so you have a pretty good idea. But I'd say that there's probably advantages to the way things were and the way things are now, right?
Yeah, in a lot of ways. But in some ways, no. Technology allows people to, again, keep a record. And if they know how to use technology, then it's a tremendous skill, tremendous resource to bring up all your bank statements individually without going to the bank, to
Mm.
being able to, you don't have to phone a DATS bus and wait 3 hours to get into a bus to go down to an office to fill out some meaningless forms. You can fill out the meaningless forms at
The
your house.
meaningless forms.
Oh,
Jeez.
yeah.
I don't know if
You
they're
know,
meaningless if you're putting in that kind of effort, Mark.
yeah. Well, I shouldn't say meaningless, but some forms that from any normal person's perspective are,
Kind of just bureaucratic. Yeah.
yeah, and inert.
Okay. But
I guess.
but apparently necessary, right?
Yes, apparently. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm putting in that kind of effort,
Like
that
knowing
better be worth
knowing
it.
knowing who knowing the cell phone number of your
Hmm.
ex-wife's, somehow you need to fill out that form. I mean, you
Really?
should see some of these forms. I mean,
I
it's
shouldn't
like
laugh because it's probably happening.
it's like a CSIS interview sometimes. But
Okay.
anyways, back to the point, being
Yeah, yeah.
able to do that from home, if you have the skill set and the infrastructure to do it,
Right.
is a tremendous advantage.
It is.
And the other thing is you don't like telling people your trauma and your issues. So sometimes just writing it down on the keyboard is easier.
Mm-hmm. Oh, for me, 1,000%, even if it's not for government. I communicate the best that way. I mean, I'm sweating, Mark. It's my anxiety. It has nothing to do with you, but I have an anxiety disorder. So
Yeah,
I had to go change my clothes and stuff to do on the
yeah,
break. The challenges that we face, like for me, I've had to, one time was horrible. I think I've almost blocked it from memory to have to go to someplace in downtown Edmonton for some government,
yeah,
I don't know what reason, something, stand in line, treated like a number, blah blah blah,
yeah,
and it was necessary. I got it done, but for the the supports I've needed, particularly during the pandemic, as I say, I have the, to use your word, infrastructure. I have the technology, thankfully, to be able to log in and fill out the information and have it sent off, and within days get an email, you're approved or not. That's pretty incredible, and I didn't have to leave my home
yeah,
to do it. So that's huge for me, and I know that for those, we talk about less fortunate and and these types of people, that's fine. But for those who are unable to make those trips, right, who have various health issues that prevent them from doing that, it's not possible for them to go. They have to, they're at home, or it's very very difficult for them to make to make those trips and to get that done. So to have that technology and to have, I want to say training, but to have that, to be educated on how to do what they need to do, especially given what you said of how it seems to be really going in the direction of the government, entirely, I think, switching to digital based, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
So, they got to make it easier. I've dealt with it for my own reasons. If it's hard for me, it's going to be really hard for the average person.
Yes.
Again, just having the hardware that's capable of doing this, whether it's a cracked screen or slow internet or what have you, these are barriers, and it's preventing some people from being able to apply and get the help they need. Can you please tell us where we can contact you and find your organization? Once again, the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights, online, and where
Sure.
where and how can people donate to the coalition?
Actually, I'll look it up on my phone because then I won't be looking like I'm leaning over. Uh,
Okay. So
uh,
I believe it's a coalition for jhr.org, correct?
yeah. So yes. So, but the website's kind of down. So the easiest thing to do is if you go to my Twitter at Mark Cherrington,
All that,
MARK.
which you can find in the show notes.
Yeah, you'll see a pinned tweet on how you can make a tax deductible donation. Where I'm associated with is in Liberty Law. My email address is
Mark at coalitionforjhr.org, right?
yes, with a K. We're
With a
located.
K, yes.
Yeah, we're at. I'm on the third floor of at 10110 107th Street, and the postal code is T5J1J4.
Say that one more time for us.
Sure, it's Mark Cherrington, and I'm at on the third floor at 10110 107th Street, Edmonton, Alberta, T5J1J4.
Got it. And that's where you can send the old cell phones too, right?
Yes, that's where you can mail them to, and that would be the only place you could mail them to because
Mhm.
the coalition is sort of doesn't really have a dwelling per se.
That's what you were saying. Made life a little easier when you got the office.
Oh yeah.
So, Mark, I guess the kind of ball's in your court here. Can you tell us a couple or even a few stories within reason about some of the client situations that you've dealt with without, of course, divulging identifiable information? But
Yeah,
we'd love to hear some of
sure.
the stories about the kind of work you do, just so we can get an idea of the scope of it.
Well, I'll put things in perspective through this first story of why I do what I do,
Okay.
why I've been fired at 4 jobs, why I continue getting up at 3 in the morning, why I'm hailed and reveled and also hated and viled, depending
That's when
on
you know
what
you're doing something
perspective.
right.
Yeah, so I, like many other people, when I was in my 20s, wanted to get involved in the field, and I thought that working within the child welfare system would be an exciting career. And I went to school at Grant MacEwan, and during the first summer break, I got a part-time job. This was a non-profit, or this was a for-profit group home, and it had a number of individuals and children in this in the building, aged 12 to 17. And when I got the job, I was told that I'd be able to shadow people a lot and get a lot of training and a good understanding of how that home helps children.
Absolutely.
So I showed up for work one day, my first day, and it was an evening shift, and it was from 6 o'clock at night till 6 in the morning. And when I got there, I found out quickly I was the only person working there. The guy that was before me gave me this panic button
Hmm.
because this is in 1990. So panic button, told me where the logbook is to write everything down. And oh, by the way, that one child, the Indigneous girl who's 13, she's she's suicidal. So watch her. I guess
That's
she
it.
was suicidal because yeah, that was my training. And off he went. I tried to make the best out of it, and I
So you weren't trained in this at all, as far
no
as
no no I was
at least at that point. At that point.
yeah no I was dumped in. I was making supper, trying to do what I would do with my 2 boys, but they were very little in those days. Make supper and watch a movie, settle down, and
Hmm.
get the kids off to bed, and stay up at night and make sure that nothing happened. But halfway through making my chili, the girl was on the phone with her mom, and again, this is before beepers.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no cell phone. She picked up. She tore the phone out of the kitchen and tossed it across the room and looked at me and then looked at the cupboard, which I had was unlocked, which I shouldn't have done, and picked up a butcher knife and said, "I'm going to kill myself, and there's nothing you can do about it," and ran off. So I'm with 4 other children and her, and she's got a butcher knife, and she runs off. And by the way, we have no phone to call 911 now because she ripped it out of the room, and this panic button doesn't seem to be working. I thought that it wouldn't be very good if she died on my first shift ever, so I gave chase. And as we're walking down, as I'm chasing her through the lawn, I kind of sweep her feet from underneath her, and she falls. Now, luckily, she didn't stab herself,
Yeah.
which was another stupid thing. And she got up, and I kind of got up, and we looked at each other, and I said, "You're not going to grab that knife." And she looked down, and she said, "Oh yeah," and I said, "Oh yeah, you are not going to grab that knife." She said, "Oh yeah, oh yeah," and I said, "Oh yeah." So I was escalating things. Another thing I was doing wrong, and so she went for the knife. Now
Yeah.
I'm the oldest of four boys, four four sons. I did what I thought was natural and the only option I had left to stop her from getting the knife. I closed my fist and I punched her,
Really?
and she dropped. And I picked up the knife and I threw it on the roof of the group home. Now she got up and she's oh,
Right.
and all these, and then I remember one kid that was running around saying, "Oh, Mark, you're so fired," and I just thought, "Oh my God, my career's over 3 hours into this," and I'm trying to settle these six kids down. The beeper's not working, the phone's not working. I'm writing everything in a logbook, but no one's coming for another 9 hours. So how do I settle them now? I said, okay, well, we'll go to 7-Eleven and we'll get everybody a slushie, a Slurpee. So I took $10 from petty cash and we all went to 7-Eleven, drank our Slurpees, and the girl was fine. Oh, I'm fine, I'm fine. She wasn't, but she was okay for the night. So actually, it was very calm after that. They drank their slushies, they went to bed, there was no incidents, and I just wrote everything I could in the logbook. And in the morning, this guy shows up, and I just give him the thing. I said, "Oh, this doesn't work. There's no phone, and everything you need to know is in the logbook." And I left him because I was exhausted. So I went home and I told my wife. I said, "I really think this is a bad choice, and I'm going to get fired." And she goes, "Why?" I said, "Well, I punched a kid. I knocked out a kid." And she went, "Oh, okay." And I said, so I said, "They're going to phone me." And sure enough, they did phone me, and they said, "Mark, there was a serious incident at the
Yeah.
group home, and we need to have a chat with you. And can you come by the office today?" And I said, "Sure." So I went to their head office, and I was on one side of the table, and across the other side was the director of the program, some board members, a supervisor, and they said, "Well, Mark, before we get into any discussion about what's going to happen, we want your side." So I started explaining
Yeah.
things
Yeah.
in a much more professional manner than I am now. But at
Yes.
1800 hours, the individual picked up a double-edged knife and fled the dwelling, blah blah blah. And as I'm explaining things, how I punched this girl
Yeah.
and all the things, they kind of were looking at each other and shaking their head, and then kind of whispering. And then they said, "Excuse me, excuse me, excuse me, Mark, Mark." And I said, "Yeah, we're not talking about the girl. We're talking about the $10 from petty cash." And I knew right then, Kevin, I knew right then, this system doesn't give a shit. It's not about the children. That some middle class white man can close his fist and punch a 13-year-old Indigenous girl and knock her out, and nobody cares. And no one even wants to talk about it. They're more interested in the $10. And I knew that right there that that was my career. That was my going to be my career. It was not going to be about the $10 of petty cash. It was going to be about the girl that I took the butcher knife and fell to the ground because of me. And maybe I was right. Maybe what I did was right. But no one evaluated it. No one critiqued it. No one reviewed it with me. And from that moment on, I said that I'm going to do what I do. And I've been doing what I do since that moment, fighting systems. I didn't last long at that group home. I got my diploma in child and whatever, and I began a career in ADAC. And same, I took a bunch of kids smoking because they were going through withdrawals at ADAC. Let me go from ADAC after 6 months. I was at a correctional facility, and they didn't like me there. I was the wrong flavor, so they let me go there. It's always been for the kid, for the vulnerable person. And I've had a lot of tragedies, but I've also had a lot of success stories. I've been able to have look back at things and say, I think I made a difference. I think I've helped people, but it goes back to that one girl.
And I'll preface this by saying I've been through some shit myself,
Yeah.
in my own variety over the past few years. I was a caregiver for my terminally ill father, and some other stuff as well. So I've had to make some decisions I never ever thought I'd ever have to make. You did the wrong thing for the right reason,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because obviously, punching a 13-year-old girl, punching anybody, is wrong. But in that moment, for that night at least, as you said, she lived.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that you did the wrong thing, you felt bad about it, still do, understandably. It worked out. It worked out well, I guess. It was well as it could have for that night, and who knows if she's
Yeah.
still with us. But in any
Yeah.
case, I suppose leave the cupboard unlocked, what have you. That was a mistake, certainly. You cared enough to put in the effort, right? You didn't just, like the other people you're talking about, where they don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You ran after her. You tackled her or whatever, and
Tripped her. Yeah.
tripped her,
Yeah.
and and she lived to see another day, one hopes. So it's a yeah, wrong thing for the right reason, and I'm sure many people can relate to that. All right, time for a quick break. You can find Kevin Talks Tech on social media, KTT Pod on Instagram and Twitter, and Kevin Talks Tech Podcast on Facebook. If you'd like to be a guest on Kevin Talks Tech to discuss your home business or how you may be simply working from home and how you're using technology, please contact me by going to the website at kevintalkstech.ca. I also really want to encourage you to donate to the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights using the link in the show notes. They're asking for the price of a cup of coffee per month, but of course you're welcome to donate more. Alright, so before we hear Mark's second story, I'd like to play this video for you. Mark was kind enough to send me his Twitter archive, and in that archive, I found a couple of videos. One I will play for you now, and the other I will play for you near the end of this podcast. In this first video that I'm going to show you here, it's basically a day in the life of what he does. It's a relatively short video, and I'd like to play it for you now.
We're going to visit a grandmother or Cookham, who's really, really worried about her grandson, being apprehended by child welfare.
It's like boom, out of the blue. It's like they never contacted me much over the.
And have they
January.
said what's on this agreement?
No.
People don't sign a car agreement without knowing everything. And that's a piece of property. This is your grandson. Nothing is more important in your life than your grandson.
All right, let's get back to the conversation with Mark and his second story.
And I always talk about a success too, and I've had
Sure.
many as well. But
Please.
I worked with a girl again, early '90s, before beepers.
Once again, yes.
Yeah, and she was 16, and she was sexually exploited, and she was working on the streets, and she got in trouble with the law, and she'd almost died a couple of times. And I said, we need to have a safety plan. We need to think of some way to keep you safe.
Yeah.
And she agreed, and we talked about what we could do. And I said, well, the advantage is every day, every evening I leave work, I drive by where you kind of hang out at nights, and I could maybe meet up with you then, and we could check in, and if you needed a few dollars for this or a helping hand for that. She goes, God, no, no, don't come near me. Don't come near me. Just a big heat score. Don't come near me. And I said, well, how am I gonna find out that everything's okay? And she goes, I'll take my glasses off. But she says, well, when you drive by slow, kind of give a little honk of your horn And when I see you, I'll go, if everything's all right, I'll go like this. I went,
Well,
what?
okay.
And go, yeah, okay, yeah, like what?
Subtle, but okay. Yeah,
And it was a really exaggerated wink.
yeah.
That was our call sign that
Okay,
everything
all
was
right.
okay. I mean, that was our emoji in 1992.
Yes.
Okay, and when I went by work all the time, it was always, and whenever it wasn't on occasion, when she'd just look at me and be, I would pull over and she'd come to the car and would need a ride really quickly or a condom or whatever. Just it was harm
Yeah,
reduction in those days too.
yeah.
And as I was driving by day after day, I started seeing her less and less and less and less. And I'd worked on her on a number of plans and programs. And finally, one day, I stopped seeing her. I just kept driving and
She was just gone.
she's gone. And like many of my other clients, you work with them, you keep them safe in that little area, and you do the best you can with what you've got. You
Yeah.
fight the battles, but then they disappear, and that's it. Well, it was just in regards to it was a hot, rainy day like today,
Hmm.
and for some reason my car wasn't working, so I was taking the number 8 bus home from downtown, and it's a big, windy bus, and it was packed. And there's all these arms, and people are in their armpits and hanging
Yeah.
on, and you can't. So I'm sitting down, and all these people are going, and through all these arms and legs and bodies, I'll call this girl Nicole. I see her. I see Nicole.
Okay.
I see this girl that that
Yeah.
I used to help,
Hmm.
and
Was it
I
was this
see
was
her.
this years later? When was this?
Yeah, this is about 15 years later, 16 years later.
15 years.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Now the
So,
Nicole
so, so she's
yeah,
in her 20s now.
30s, young 30s. She was 16. Yeah, so about
Oh,
30,
I'm sorry.
32.
Yes. Excuse me.
Yeah, yeah. So
And you recognized her. Amazing.
oh yeah, yeah. I don't and But what I saw really surprised me. I didn't see somebody disheveled and uh, needing any sort of help or supports. What I saw was a lady in a blue trench coat with a bag, with a leather suitcase that had an emblem of a bank on it, and she was on her phone talking to her husband, and she was talking about how getting the kids to soccer, and it
Oh,
was
wow.
everything that
A
was about
normal
normal.
conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was standing up and I wanted to go say, "Hey, Nicole, it's me." I stopped myself and I realized that at the time that I was working with her and seeing her and trying to help her, she was being sexually assaulted
Yeah.
15, 16 times a day. She was in conflict with the law. She had poor health. She was a mess. And I was part of that life. I was part of everything that was wrong with that life. And I knew that if she wanted to ever get a hold of me, she could. So I
Hmm.
realized that I had done what I had done, and it seemed that I'd completed correctly. So I
Huh.
stopped myself from reaching out to her and saying hi. And I just sat on the bus and I watched her for a while, and just amazed at how this young person had really thrived and become,
Yeah.
such so.
Not gonna lie to you. I'd love to know the story of how that happened, but I hear
Yeah,
you.
and you don't in most of them, and that's what's appropriate. But as I'm looking through her and we stop, the bus stops, and I lose sight of her, and
Yeah.
that's it for again. I've stopped,
Yeah.
but just about as the bus is about to turn off, I get this knock on the window, and I look out the bus window, and there's Nicole, and she's got a big smile on her face, and she goes like this to me,
Oh, really?
and off she walks. You know, I,
She noticed you too.
it was that signal. It's like, hey, Mark, everything's okay. Don't come near me. I'm fine. Thank you.
Wow.
And yeah. So, it's that was just a very
That's
warm
all you
feeling.
need. That's all you need.
Yeah. And it's
Wow.
it's what community is, and you help people the best you can. You take it from there, and sometimes it doesn't work out. Sometimes it's very tragic. Lord knows I've got a list of names of kids that never made it. But there's also Nicole's, and a lot of Nicole's. You play a role. You play a role helping with technology, giving phones out, or helping, and you're part of the puzzle and part of the connections that make somebody move onward in their life and upward. That's the reason I got into the field, and this is the reason why I'm still in the field, doing what I do every day that I can do, is because, you know, as long as you can change trajectories of people, and they come to me.
Hmm.
I never push myself on a person saying, "Hey, I'm Mark. I can help you."
Oh.
I'm always referred to, or people come to me.
Hmm.
As part of my thing is making myself as visible as possible, and
And you clearly take that to heart.
and have
Uh,
a
yeah.
big welcome sign any way I can. And but
Yeah,
I always,
with Nicole, this girl, now woman you're talking
yeah,
about,
yeah,
goodness knows the urge was there to go say hi, and
yeah,
to go catch up and check in and
yeah,
whatever, right? Like regular people
yeah,
in regular situations do. For you to have that, can I call it self-awareness?
yeah. Spidey
Uh,
sense. I call it Spidey sense.
yeah, where you just
Yeah,
know
no,
instinctively,
yeah,
over decades of experience, what have you, that this is how you approach this,
yeah,
or this is how you act in this situation, and clearly you were correct because of the way that she responded to you.
yeah, yeah,
And I just think that's incredible, to have, again, just that self-awareness and that instinct to where you're keeping her safe. She noticed you noticed her. That is a success story, absolutely.
I always, again, whether it be Nicole or any of the kids I work with, since that 13-year-old girl,
Yeah,
I decided not to get into their lives. I decided people to come to me.
and that's what I'm saying. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
and they knock on the door and I answer. I
that's
don't
right.
open the door and say, "Hey, come
And
over
honestly,
here."
that's a wonderful approach,
Yeah,
and that's how change happens. I know enough in my life where no matter how strong the urge is to help somebody else, even though whether I'm fully capable or not of doing so, they have to they have to ask for help first.
yeah, and that's not to say that if someone's in a car accident
Oh,
and
no,
they're
no, no,
laying on
no,
the
no, no,
road
no,
that you
no,
don't.
no.
But but in the sense of wanting to help people that are conflicted
Yes,
and in situations that terrible. You just have to trust your signage and your that
yeah,
you've that that word will get that you can call this guy and he'll help.
that's right. Yeah.
And I get called on lots
But I mean,
daily.
even just for friends, family, what have you, where
Yeah,
whether they're in a good spot or not, good
yeah,
things are happening or bad.
yeah,
Not to generalize it, but the again, and I've done this myself. Hopefully it's a minor issue, whatever, but sometimes it's a big problem. I think of alcoholics. I think of the situations vary greatly until the moment that they ask for help and are willing to put in that change. They're ready, right?
yeah,
Where they come to you, they come to me, whoever, they say, I need your help, or whatever the request is. There's nothing wrong with putting out the olive branch of saying, I'm here for you whenever you need me, if you need me. And clearly you did. Hence that story and how it started, right? You played by the rules, by her rules, or by her terms.
yeah.
You had a huge impact as a result. I almost get emotional thinking about it.
Yeah, yeah, no, I do often too, and that's the addictive part of this job, Kevin, is you get pretty emotional about lots of things. You get angry, like you have this really rage in you, like
Yeah,
how dare, but you're not you don't go home and stew about the rage. You say, I'm gonna
you
fight for
channel
this
it. You channel
kid,
it.
and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm gonna fight like I've never fought before. It's a great field, and technology is a big part of it.
I guess those are kind of two good stories, and depending on how you look at it, you saved the girl from killing herself. You found out the system is shitty, which isn't great,
Yeah,
and then of course dealing with this young lady or young girl, excuse me,
yeah,
and then and then encountering her many years later,
yeah.
and having that experience.
I was in a position once where I was able to really listen to kids. and to young people and really understand what they were going through. And that's when I had a radio show,
Oh,
Youth Menace. It was called Youth Menace. It was on CGSR,
oh,
and it
that
ran for
sounds
about,
vaguely familiar from your tweets. Yes.
yeah, it ran for about 12 years,
Wow.
from 2000 to about 2012. I ran, or night, yeah, about 2000. And it was Canada's only young offender child welfare radio show. And there was no kill button. It was not a podcast in those days. It was just live radio. And because CGSR was a nonprofit, kids could work their community service hours
Oh,
talking on the show. And
cool.
you didn't breach anybody's
No.
confidentiality because it was just radio. And they would have their own synonym, like their own different names or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
But what was really neat about the show is we did, 50 shows a year for 12 years. I don't know, and we'd have thousands of guests.
Hmm.
Thousands of, is to be able to listen to their stories.
Yes.
And each story was just as emotional and just as tragic as the ones that I told. Some were so uplifting. It was just a very, 1,000 stories
Hmm.
that kids talk to me about.
Yeah.
And I've thought about doing it again, but radio, to be honest, is dead for young people.
Uh,
They just,
no, podcast is the way to go these days.
yeah.
And
Uh,
actually, we weren't it wasn't being recorded at the time, but the first time we chatted a couple of weeks ago before we had to reschedule,
yeah,
you had kind of touched on that.
yeah. So yeah, it's.
Is that the kind of thing that you want to get back into, that same sort of format?
I would like. I think have something where I could have a live channel and talk about issues like a YouTube channel, and have camera A and camera B.
Oh, geez, yeah,
And camera B,
you're getting
camera B,
fancy, Mark.
can't no well camera B would be behind them
Mm-hmm.
because you couldn't identify them,
Good
and
call.
camera A would be kind of on me or who else was hosting the show,
I like it.
and just listen to stories,
Yes.
listen to issues, and talk about issues facing people. And I think
When do you think you might be able to start getting that off the ground?
uh, I'm hoping maybe early next year.
Okay.
And I want to work a deal with all the probation officers that adults can work their community service hours.
Yeah, do
Talking
that
to
again for sure. Yeah,
yeah,
I can't wait. I look forward to
yeah,
that. I will.
yeah.
I will listen. I will watch.
And Youth Menace was always described as brilliantly wonderful or a wonderful disaster, one or the other. I mean, the shows were just,
Yeah.
or they were great. I mean, that was.
Well, what
But
else do you expect?
yeah,
Like, really?
yeah,
Yeah, and for that matter, I'll cut this what I'm going to say here out, but I'm going to put a disclaimer probably at the beginning of things, just because it's tough. It's some of the things you're saying are not easy for some people
no,
to
the
hear.
triggers. Yeah,
Yeah, the triggers.
yeah,
Exactly. So I will be putting, for lack of a better word, a disclaimer at the beginning of the podcast, or at least the second hour. And I hope that people who aren't triggered will continue to listen and appreciate what you're saying. We can go, if you have a couple more stories, I'm open to it. If you want to start wrapping it up, we can do that too. But I'd love to hear whatever you're
Well,
willing to say.
I think we'll just wrap it up. I think
Okay.
I got if there's ever a coming back to me next year, we can chat up again, and I got some more stories. But
Yeah, and on that note, I know there are certain stories, or maybe elements of the stories, that you have obviously shared on social media.
yeah,
Not of the stories you just told me, I
yeah,
don't think.
yeah,
But certainly your Twitter account, you post quite regularly on that, and all that'll be in the show notes. Twitter.com/Mark Cherrington, as you said before.
yeah.
And you also have some photos there. You're very careful about what you post, no question. People should really go and see that.
But I got lots of stuff there on right now,
You
so just take a
do.
look at it and just take a look. And
To have the visual, that people can look at while you talk, with I think really helps to make it more real for people.
you get a skewed account of people, and the news always seems to point about the worst of people. And anytime I get an opportunity to talk about the best of people, like Nicole,
Yeah.
and talk about the work I do and the changes people make, then it's worth it. And I really thank you, Kevin, for having me on the show. I really enjoyed my time.
You're thanking me. Oh, that's well.
Oh no, yeah, no,
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 I mean, geez, thank you. Uh, that kind of feels like a comparison to how much I can't express in words how much I thank you for what you do.
oh, it's just,
And I'm sure that echoes everyone who's listening and
but
watching and reading your tweets and all that.
it's easy to do what I do.
No,
It's
it's
just
not.
like it's I don't know. It's like paragliding. I mean, you need it looks dangerous and weird and
It's not easy work, Mark.
exhausting.
I mean,
But
I
yeah,
know you're used to it, but it's not easy work.
no. It's I wouldn't.
And I mean, you barely touched the surface of some of the stuff. Your Twitter account speaks to that. People you've dealt with and their circumstances, and it's horrific at times.
Yeah,
It's stomach turning. It's avoidable. So
yeah.
with the right resources. So I'm just so incredibly grateful
Okay.
that
Yeah.
that
Oh,
you do what you do, and that your organization, once again, Coalition for Justice and Human Rights, that there are people like you who
oh,
will
thanks.
fill in those gaps
Yeah.
in the system. You can't do everything that you want to do. I'm certain of that,
No.
but you do what you can. I'm not sure if there are others. I'm sure there must be, but I don't
Oh
think.
yeah. Well, if there's any budding human rights activists down there that are watching the show, please reach out because yeah, if you I can certainly help you, and we need the help.
Okay,
So
you need more than just you on the front lines of what you're doing, right?
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely. And I know it takes a special kind, not just anybody can do it, but like you say, for those who are inclined and kind of built for that, it's not easy work, but good God, is it rewarding.
yeah, yeah. It is.
Uh, so thank you for opening up. Thank you for sharing on social media what you can share. Because it really opens people. I know because people comment, people like, people retweet,
Yeah,
your donations, all of this. And it wouldn't, and I'm certain a good part of it wouldn't happen if you didn't share the details that you do.
yeah. I always
So
like sharing my stories once in a while over a good beer.
over a good beer, yes,
Yeah,
sir.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I realize you're humble about it, and I appreciate that. It's this is what you do for a living, right?
yeah,
This is who you are. I know you know how important and what a huge impact it has. Otherwise, and that's your reward, right? You're not going to get a success every single time. You've established that, but
yeah,
you do what you can, and that's
yeah,
what matters. Change people's lives in such in dramatic ways as you do, small things to big things. That's
yeah,
incredible. And I once again, I thank you. We thank you. I'll go that far as to say we thank you for what you and your organization do. And I encourage everyone to please take time. Once again, I'll say this: push back on, I should say contact. Excuse me, your MLA, your MP, anybody who will listen, via email, via phone, etc., and really push for these resources to be given to the organizations like the Coalition and others, Bissell Center, etc., to help the most vulnerable in our communities, because that's needed. They need
yeah,
the basics. You need to be able to get ahead to overcome that.
yeah.
And when it's your basic needs are barely being met, if they're being met at all, it can't happen. So
Exactly.
everything from monetary to smartphones to whatever people can contribute in whatever way. We really need to make this more of an issue,
Yeah,
and get people much more involved, because bad things happen on a dime sometimes. And just like anybody could, the hospital is there. God willing, you'll never need it.
yeah,
But thank God it's there when you do.
yeah. Exactly.
Trying to stay composed here because this means a hell of a lot to me.
Yeah, I can tell.
I wouldn't do this if I wasn't willing to, Mark.
Yeah, yeah.
There's not too many other people in this world that I bet who care as much as you do.
Oh, I think everybody's got it in them, Kevin. It's just being able to do it, and
Well, for
I
30
ideal.
years, I mean,
Yeah,
that's 30 years. Uh, you're something special. Uh, sorry, you probably don't want to hear that, but you are.
I meet thousands of social workers
I
who,
know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
but
yes.
they're confined to where they
You're
work.
here.
They have mortgages. And they're confined to their messaging, and they're confined to these very small limits of what they can do. And I'm fortunate enough to just open my wings and really be who I want to be and help who
And that's how you get shit done.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and
It,
speaking
it,
of,
it, yeah, it's right. I'll let you go. I'm thinking. You said you have to go pick up your son. I apologize.
oh, no, 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 you don't. I just got to be there in 15 minutes, so I
Okay.
gotta.
All right. No, it's you're absolutely right. You don't have the constraints tying you down as far as being part of the system, as it were.
Yeah,
You can do what you want and help the people you need to help to the best of your ability. Um, and I wish you had more resources to do it with, but hopefully a podcast like mine
yeah,
and the one that you're going to be starting looks like next year
yeah,
will really help with that.
yeah, yeah. I hope so.
That'll be incredible. Thank you, Mark. It's been an absolute pleasure to talk to you.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
same. And this doesn't have. It just doesn't have to be a one-off, Kevin.
Thank you.
Anytime you want to chat, just let me know.
Thank you. Very kind, considering how important your time is.
So as long as I can share a beer with a friend, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm in right there. I got my iced coffee.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, and at some point, when as my situation improves, as I said, I've faced
yeah,
some difficulties. Then
yeah.
I'll make it up to Edmonton. I certainly have a few friends up there. We spent 20 years in the area before we left,
Okay.
so it'll be great to get together once I feel comfortable doing that sort of thing again.
Sure. No, no, no.
And we'll have that, and I'll buy you a beer. That's the least
Okay.
I can do.
Okay. It sounds like a deal.
All right, Mark. I'll let you go. Thank you again. It's been again. I can't thank you enough. I've really enjoyed this, and thank you for spending a good part of your afternoon with me.
Oh, and thank you for having me, Kevin. I really
Perfect.
appreciated the time.
All right.
Okay. Take care.
I'm honored to call you a friend. Thank you.
Same here.
Perfect. Thank you, Mark. Talk to you
Cheers.
later. Cheers. Cheers. Thank you.
I'm Mark Cherrington. You might know me from my social advocacy work. On my own, I've been helping people for 3 decades, responding to calls for everything from human rights violations to helping a young mom get milk for her hungry children. Now I'm asking for your help. I've teamed up with the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights, a registered charity. Together, we are working within our community to help our neighbors and families gain access to justice, human rights, and dignity. Your donation helps us and allows us to continue this critical work. The Coalition will provide you a tax receipt, and together we can make a difference.
I truly appreciated this conversation with Mark. I'm sincerely grateful that he took the time to share with us about the Coalition and their work, and his work. And I'm honored to hear a couple of stories he was willing to share to bring attention and resources to those efforts. It takes a certain kind of person to do the work he and his team do, and I couldn't possibly admire or respect him more, and I suspect you might feel the same way. There are certain uncomfortable realities that many, sadly, in our society face on a daily basis, and we'd rather not think about them or talk about them, to be honest. But it's unsung heroes like Mark, along with many, many others, who make incredible differences in society to bridging the gap and to allowing people the dignity to fight on, and the resources to get ahead. But of course, much more needs to be done.
Every day I'm flooded with heartbreaking texts and phone calls. Pleas for help asking for food, a safe ride, or helping a child in need. I'm on the road, often driving 200 kilometers day and night. I'm Mark Cherrington, and over the years I've established relationships with families who don't have anyone. Many of you have helped me by giving money, and I thank you. I'm overwhelmed by your generosity, and I'm asking you to make it part of your yearly goodwill. Each month, for the price of a carton of milk or a bus ticket, you could build up our resources at the Coalition for Justice and Human Rights. Together, you will help provide diapers for a baby, or fight an eviction notice for a single mother, or help that 12-year-old sexually exploited child. These issues are important, not only for the vulnerable, but all of us, by making our community that much kinder.
And as Mark and I talked about in part 1 of this conversation, which you can go back and listen to, we suggest that you donate your old smartphones using the links in the show notes. You can contact Mark and you can mail them those old smartphones to him. And they'll be put to very good use in the hands of the vulnerable people in society who need them. Because make no mistake, these devices are handheld computers for people, all of us. And they don't just enable people to call 911, even if they don't have a cell phone plan. They also allow them to do things on the internet, such as find and complete and send the necessary government forms to get the help that they need. Never mind the apps and other benefits that smartphones offer. Once again, you can connect with Mark on Twitter at Mark Cherrington, MarkCherrington, and you can find that in the show notes. Coming up in episode 5, I'll talk with Edmonton-based graphic designer Serena Tang. In episode 6, which is a 2-parter as well, we'll hear from Heather Lyon, who provides accounting software training for small businesses, and she'll talk about her adventures in northern Canada, doing training in remote communities as part of her business. Some very fascinating and interesting stories there that I did not expect her to tell. I didn't realize that was part of her business before I talked to her. And I'll also include some pictures she has sent me regarding those adventures. Thank you so much for watching or listening to this episode of Kevin Talks Tech. I appreciate it.